as Nick switches on his camera and his microphone, I'll tell you that he's actually the other side of Oxford from me. He's a teacher and writer, and he's based in Oxford. You work at Doverbrook, which you didn't realise, Nick. He's engaged both in teaching and training in a variety of international contexts in Italy, in Latin America, and the Middle East, and many years' experience preparing students around the world for IELTS and university courses. He has written a couple of books, one on IELTS and author of one of the professional development titles, which we were talking about last night. The development title in this case is Motivational Teaching. He's also involved in academic research and has been contributing to handbooks on motivation for language learning, and has co-authored the position paper on motivation and social learning, which we'll talk about later. Let's get Bob Block 3 off with a very good speaker. Get ready for some interaction and some motivation. Nick, over to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Sean. I was quite enjoying your introductions there. I wish we could listen to a bit more. But anyway, thank you so much, everyone, for joining today. And let's introduce the topic of the presentation today. We're going to cast your mind back, actually. We're going to try and go backwards and try and remember 4 years ago when we were all kicked out of our classrooms and asked to start teaching online. And I don't know if you remember that. We probably tried to block out the memories, because for me anyway, it wasn't a particularly great experience. And one of the things I remember most is that student motivation just collapsed. I couldn't get my class doing anything. I don't know if you had a similar experience. It could have been that I wasn't particularly trained with, I think it was Microsoft Teams I was using at the time, and it took me a while to get used to it. But I think there was something fundamentally difficult, wasn't there, about transitioning from the classroom into that online space. Anyway, I remember getting back to the classroom, as I'm sure you do, and just loving being with our students again. That joy of seeing their smiling faces and, a real teacher that I could talk with again. And that, I think, was my lasting impression of it, that it reaffirmed for me, I think, the importance of being with my students. It's funny though, since that, a lot of conversation in teacher training events seems to have been, and in the news, about AI and how it's taking over, of course. And there was fear amongst many of the teachers that I work with, not fear, just like apprehension that, one day perhaps AI will take over some of the roles that we do with our students. And I thought, oh my gosh, haven't we learned anything? Surely the message from the lockdown was that actually we do need to be physically present with our students. And I maybe think, well, maybe we haven't learned the lessons from lockdown, perhaps. We need to think about why it was that it was so difficult to motivate and engage with our students while online. So really, that's where today's sort of session comes from. So let's do it. We're going to look at the different ways that being together with students can bring benefits to their motivation. And most importantly, of course, how we can capitalize on that to motivate learning. Okay. Now, of course, this isn't a new idea. The idea that, being together with students is useful. And I think we could perhaps go to a quote from someone called Earl Stevick. I'll just give you a moment to read that. So, less on the materials that some of us spent ages writing, techniques which we've spent ages training ourselves in, linguistic analysis of the text of English, the grammar. According to Stevick here, it doesn't really matter so much. What really matters is what's going on between the people in the classroom. I wonder if you agree with that. Should we have a quick poll, maybe, get us warmed up? So I'm going to set a poll now, or ask, is it Rudrani? You're going to help with this if you set a quick poll. Do you agree with Stevick's basic idea that all of the kind of stuff about materials, the planning, the activities, the tasks that we spend so long doing actually are far less important than just what happens between people together in that classroom space? If you agree with that idea, maybe tick A. If you disagree, tick B. Right. Okay, we'll just give everyone a moment.
It's currently 91% I agree, and 9% disagree. There's about 600 people have done the poll, so 500 on so I agree, and 52 I disagree.
Then our job is done. We can all go home. No, it's I think, yeah, something I instinctively felt I agreed with as well, without perhaps knowing why. Just sort of realizing that was the most important thing. Sean, I've actually lost my controls to move forward and backwards through the slides as well. Can you think of any reason why that might be?
Yes, because the poll was when the poll was up, it should be there now.
Ah, there you go. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, thanks, Sean. So, yeah, most of us agree with that. When I look at this quote, then it makes. Sorry, let's just go back to the quote. Actually, I just want to comment on it briefly. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff going on between people in the classroom, and I think it might be useful just to perhaps define what we mean by what goes on between people. Because when we were online during the lockdown, there was a lot of stuff. We were communicating with students quite a lot. I think I sent lots of messages, I prepared probably some videos of me talking, and what else did we do? Feedback on homework. So there was quite a lot of stuff going on between people. But it obviously didn't really have the impact that sort of being together. So what I'd like to do is today sort of define this going on between people as social interaction, and actually live social interaction, the kind of stuff that happens when we are present with people. Okay, so that's what we're going to focus on. So I think what we need to start by doing is just defining what we mean by social interaction. So I'm just going to ask you just to post a few ideas in the chat box. So types of social interaction that take place within the English language classroom, or perhaps the most important types. If you could just post a few thoughts. What are the key types of social interaction that happen inside the class? It depends on the atmosphere. Yeah. I think some of these comments are going to come in over time. I think it's taking a while to get the comments in, but let's move forward perhaps and discuss, and then we'll hopefully keep an eye on what people are pasting. Pair work, group work, games, debates. There we go. All coming in. Dialogues, absolutely. Drama, pairing, sharing ideas. Yeah, lots of. I think debates. Most of us, interestingly, are talking about the kind of work that we do in the class, the activities we plan, which I think is really interesting. Yeah, games, competitions. Gosh, it's true, isn't it? As English language teachers, we do so much social interaction. I guess that's obviously social chat is quite a big area of what we do. It's just asking after students and small talk. But as most of you are posting, actually, it's the kind of cooperation we do during the lesson, such as role play activities, the debates, which is probably the lion's share, isn't it, of the communication that we do in the class. But interestingly, of all the comments that people put, I don't think anyone put much about the kind of non-verbal, which of course, as we know, is 55% of communication. I mean, certainly I've never put in my lesson plan, stand nonchalantly by the board, or go and sit by a student and look at their screen with an interested expression on your face. We don't. It's not something we plan. Is, I guess, the point I'm making. And it's not something that leaps to mind as well. And yeah, I reckon it's so important. So just the whether it's smiling and clapping, the obvious things, but also even our posture. And I think as a teacher, I've tried since preparing this webinar actually, to maybe instead of standing rigid at the front, to perhaps lean against the desk a bit more, to sit half on the desk, to crouch down by students, to walk around the class a lot more, just in realization really that so much of communication in the classroom is communicated without actually saying anything. I think if we look happy to be there, sort of relaxed, like we actually want to be teaching these guys, then they will respond and feel, yeah, a bond will be created between us. So yeah, non-verbal interaction, something I'd like to bring out today quite a bit. So I think all of these things are pretty important for building relatedness. And in terms of motivation, that's, I think, the key component. If social interaction leads to builds a sense of relatedness, or can do. It can, of course, do the opposite. But when we're thinking about motivation, all of these things, whether it's social chat, the kind of role plays, the kind of non-verbal exchanges, the smiles, help students build this sense of belonging and acceptance, a feeling of connection with others. And that's really, I think, the value of social interaction for motivation. But relatedness is one thing. How does that concept, which comes from self-determination theory, relate to progress, to motivation to study? And I think there are three ways that it can. The first is perhaps the obvious one. Let me just move forward. It's that kind of joy of being, students line up with an excited expression on their face. They want to attend and participate. If they have that prospect of feeling a connection with people, they will be enthusiastic. As a lot of you were in the chat, before we started, that anticipation of connection. So I think that's really key. I've called this integrative motivation, which is perhaps an odd expression. We used to use that in the 80s. Well, I remember using it in the 80s. I think it was Gardner, wasn't it? And he talked a lot about the idea that we're motivated to learn because we can then integrate with native speaker communities. We can go and travel and meet people. And I think it's fallen out of favour a little bit, this idea. But I always think, well, no, actually, the integration happens also with non-native speakers, with anyone who uses English, any language learning community, including school groups and classrooms. So I think this concept is still really useful. We want to be part of something, and so we come with energy and keen to learn. That's the integrative motivation. More importantly, perhaps, I think, is this idea of goal sharing. So when we feel related to people, we kind of want to do what they're doing. And if we don't feel related to people, we kind of want to do the opposite. Maybe we want to even sabotage what they want to do. So what we're prepared to do when we're together with people is often sacrifice our own goals, personal goals, for the goals of the group. The goals of the group take a sort of higher priority for us. And I think we also are more aware of what we're doing as well, what sort of identity we're sort of presenting to others. So if the goals of the group are to learn English, we'll sort of be thinking about our behaviour as well. Often when no one's looking at me, I'm pretty lazy, to be honest. But when I'm kind of with others, I'm reflecting on what I'm doing. Am I, participating? Am I working together with others? So this is something which only happens when we're present with people. Apparently it doesn't work when we're at a distance from people, at a sort of psychological distance. But when we come together, we start sharing the goals of others in the room, and in particular the teacher. So if there's a real sense of relatedness, students will want to do what you want to do. And hopefully, of course, as teachers, we want them to learn. So therefore, do you see what I mean? That sense of relatedness can lead to them striving in a way that would not happen, I think, if they weren't together with us in the classroom. The third thing, of course, is this sort of, if we feel related to people, a sense of connection, we trust them more, and therefore we're willing to communicate. I think this concept, willingness to communicate, we're seeing a lot more nowadays. And it sort of comes, I think, from this foreign language anxiety concern. A lot of students, especially with English language teaching, of course, or any language teaching, they have to take risks, huge risks. Having people laugh at your attempts at an English accent or the pronunciation, every time you open your mouth is potential for massive embarrassment. I think in a way that just doesn't exist. Well, not exist as much in other subjects. So I think that sense that we're together is so important if we're going to ask students to trust us enough to say words in English in front of a group, in front of peers, in front of others. Okay. So there we go. Relatedness motivates learning because it increases our integrative motivation to attend and participate. It makes sure that students share our goals if we feel related to them, and it increases their willingness to communicate. Okay. So when I was doing this, I was thinking, gosh, I reckon there's lots of sort of objections we might hold to this. I mean, classrooms don't feel like places where there's a breezy, fun atmosphere. I mean, surely parties, pubs, even places like that are the places to feel related to people as adults. You know, as the classroom, perhaps we don't think of necessarily as a place where we can all feel together, feel a sense of belonging and affiliation. And I think there's good reasons for that. If we look at the screen, we can see perhaps 4 objections, which, you know, you might hear. Of course, students don't choose their teachers. They don't even choose their classmates. This is something called homophily or homophily, the motivation we get from being with people we've chosen to be with. So what chance do we have? Students don't want to hang out with their teacher. And the second point, many students can't regulate their emotions. So classrooms actually sometimes really difficult spaces where you get someone who's a bit of a class bully or shouting out a lot. How can you have a kind of sense of bonding when you've got a few difficult students who are struggling with their emotions? I think for many of us, classrooms is a place of discipline, and I've been to many schools where the expectation of students is they are just sitting there quietly doing their notes. Maybe not so much in English learning, but it's certainly an expectation I think many teachers have. And of course, if we want them just to be part of a language learning community, isn't the online space the place to do that? Should we really expect them to be doing it, feeling that sense of belonging in the classroom? I wonder what you think about this. So we're just going to go to another quick poll. And this time, I'd like you just to tell me what you think, really. This idea that we can create a really strong sense of relatedness in the class. If you think, yeah, in my experience, absolutely can. Put A. If you think it's basically just a pipe dream, really, B. Or if you think it depends on the class, put C. Yeah, I guess that's why you guys are here at this session, because you're so positive. That's really, really good to see, isn't it? Almost evenly split, mostly possible, but often, you know, a real struggle with the class. So yeah, I think that's something we need to deal with, isn't it? Those few classes where we're just going to really struggle to create that sense of relatedness. Let's make sure we come back to that idea. Yeah, I think as more of you add, that positivity is coming through even stronger now. I think I really agree as well. Although I will say I struggle. I think sometimes it really isn't easy. And you only have to get slightly annoyed with students and it's gone, disappeared. Which I've done a couple of times this year and really struggled to get classes back on side. But let's just go through some of these objections, and I'll just share the reasons why I think they can be overcome. Students don't choose their classmates and teachers, but actually when students are hanging out with people they do choose to be with, is it great? Is it fun all the time? How many times do students fall out with their best friends? It's tough to hang out actually with peers. In a classroom, you've got a teacher who's a safe, trusted adult who can intervene if there's a problem, who can help resolve disputes. And I think a lot of students actually love having an adult in charge. It just takes away all that pressure of bickering or sort of saying the right thing. So I think actually, just because students haven't chosen to be with a teacher or haven't chosen a teacher, I think some really do feel that the potential to be in a space where the teacher takes charge as a real release from the pressures of being with peers and having to manage everything. The same goes, I think, for the dysregulated students, maybe students with neurodiversity, the ones who are maybe talking too much, the ones even a bit shy, but who aren't contributing, the ones looking sullen, whatever. I think as a teacher, you can sort of manage behaviour a little bit more. In a social group, for example, if someone was a bit dominating or a bully, you couldn't just click your fingers and they'll go away. do you know what? In a classroom, you can. If absolutely necessary, you can just ask that student to leave, have a few minutes to regulate, and then come back in. So that's a bit of a dream, I think, for a lot of students. The idea that, if a teacher is on it and can regulate the interaction, those students that tend to disrupt can actually be kept in check, I suppose. The discipline idea in the green there on the screen, I think, we shouldn't forget that there's nothing wrong with discipline. We're not saying that classroom should be a freewheeling, kind of chatty, open space where everyone can say what they like. You can have discipline and rules. Kids love rules if they're enforced fairly, I think. And we don't have to have, you can communicate with body language, as we said. We don't have to have fun and jokes all the time. A smile and a sense that you love being there with some good class rules that stop people shouting out. That's great bonding. So, I don't think we need to think of it's an either or thing. I think we can have really good discipline and still have really great bonding. And the last one, the online thing, well, yeah, but online communities, are they really these fun places of like nirvanas where people can choose exactly who they're with and who they talk to? Well, there's bullying, isn't there? There's a lot of unpleasantness. And online, I think people often kind of feel constrained. They can't really open up and share. They have to, sort of do what's expected of them, say everything's awesome and just like everything. And I don't think that's real interaction. So although, of course, students can form online relationships, I don't think we should worry about that and think, that's the place where they can build relatedness. I think it's the opposite is true. So all in all, instead of sort of with these objections, I would actually say, turn them all on their heads really and say, no, the classroom is perhaps the only place. It's a golden opportunity to build relatedness with students, and we should seize it. Now, all of this is going to result in a lot of pressure on us as the teacher. If we look at some of the things I've just sort of said, we've got to get on top of the disruptive students. We've got to enforce the discipline. We've got to be that sort of fair-minded teacher that focuses on everyone. There's a lot of pressure. It's incredibly difficult for teachers. And I think we have to be aware what the students kind of appreciate about us. I think, for example, I often don't feel particularly sort of fun as a person. I often feel quite anxious. And I know that when I'm feeling like that, I'm not going to give much to my students. And it's almost a bit like an act, isn't it? Teaching. I don't know if you find the same. But sometimes I know that they expect me to be fun. I don't know what it is quite, but I know that I've got to somehow sort of make sure I inhabit that persona. Now, I'm not saying I have to be someone different from who I am, but I think I have to understand the dimension of my personality that they expect to see as students. Otherwise, I think I'm not going to create that bond. And essentially, this is the point. I think that the whole thing about relatedness purely depends on us. If we don't get that relationship right with students, then I'm afraid the classroom is not going to feel like a space where everyone enjoys that sense of connection. So it's probably worth just reflecting briefly on each of us individually, how we feel about this. So I'm just going to skip on to the next slide. So can we have just poll 3? What's your sort of style with students? What do they expect from you? Is it about the kind of, I mean, I know so many teachers like this, they're just great laugh and the students just come along and have an awesome time. And I must admit, I always think, I wish I could do that. Can't, unfortunately. But is it the kind of that quiet teacher that just knows what they're doing, the authority, the quiet calmness that students love? Are you that kind of, is that what they enjoy about you? Or is it the that nurturing kind of caring sort of style, which a lot of teachers I think do beautifully? Is that what they expect about you? So maybe just choose one, and how do you either try or perhaps what students, what do you feel is your style that students expect to see from you? Okay, right, let's have a look. Yeah. I mean, that doesn't surprise me, actually, the result. 64, that last style. 65 going up. Do you know why it doesn't surprise me, actually? It's because you lot are here. I mean, if you didn't care deeply about your students, you simply wouldn't be here, would you? So I think it's not a representative sample in that sense. We've got just some incredibly positive teachers here. But I still think that's, even if you're not feeling like you haven't got the ready jokes or the discipline is, your routines aren't there, you can still ask after students, can't you? And I think it's a really good way of just showing them that you're building that relatedness. Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that. So we're going to move. Well, I'm just going to share what I do as someone who I think students expect sort of fun from me, even though I'm not particularly good at doing it. And so what I have to do before I go into the classroom is a kind of pep talk to myself. And I say my lessons are about fun and energy. We sort of play with language. We reveal, we inquire, we dare to challenge. And I just sort of try and remind myself what interactions are expected of me. And especially with the year 10s and 11s, we're talking kids, 15, these, I have to sometimes tell myself, they often look like they really don't care. And I struggle and think, they don't like me. This is going to not go well. And I just have to tell myself sometimes, they're kids. Just smile. They will love it. They don't want to be feared. They want you to reach them. And and I have to just remind myself. And if you're not feeling great, I just have to say, it's not my students' problem. I'm going to just make the next hour about them. Try not to think about myself. So anyway, I don't know if you do something similar, but I thought it's something maybe that as teachers we have to be aware of what is expected of us. Maybe especially as you get older as well. I think as I'm coming up to my 50th now, I find my face doesn't, it tends to look quite serious, and the ready smile is perhaps less easy to put on. So anyway, I've started to do that, but yeah. So shall we move on now? And I think that's probably the first thing to say, that be in control of your image, what students are expecting from you. But I think for the rest of the talk, I'd just like to look at more concrete strategies that we can take forward in building a sense of relatedness in our class. Okay, and I hope one or two of them you might think, yeah, that's a direction that I can sort of develop in. So the first one, well, let's look at the 6. The first one is creating a safe and accepting space. A fairly obvious one, I suppose. So I love this quote. So initial bonds of attraction are gradually replaced. And actually, I think for those of you who went for the third option, I think you'd probably, feel quite good about this quote, because I think very often, maybe the first students love the jokes and the fun, but actually by the end, it's the teacher that's there for them, the one who remembers what they told them last week about a family event they've got coming up. Oh, how did that go? Or whatever. Or it's the teacher that understands that they're going to be a bit stressed that day, or gives them extra time to do homework if necessary. I don't know. I think, to be honest, over time, it's that sort of showing that you're there for your students is probably the biggest, most important thing. But anyway, how do we do that? Well, there are obvious. It's like a checklist, really, isn't it? Things we must do to create a safe and accepting place. So obviously, we would all do this naturally, wouldn't we? Yeah, maybe the last one's interesting. I never thought of the kind of extracurricular stuff, organising a charity event, as signalling our values and making students feel that we're in a safe space because everyone cares. But it's true, actually, isn't it? If we show we care about the world around us, that I think students will understand that we care generally. It's interesting. Different opinions are tolerated, and that's really hard. But showing even the students that come in and say the most, controversial things, that don't worry, you can say things with us. it's fine. We will talk about it. We're not going to let you get away with everything, but, you know, come into this classroom and feel free to be yourself and to share. Make a mistake. If anyone, you know, laughs, obviously, you know, deal with that quite seriously. Yeah, anyway, I'm not going to spend much time on that because I think that's probably what we all do anyway. So let's move on to the second one. This one I like the idea of, building a community. I don't think I'd ever thought of a classroom as a community, but what if we tried to reimagine our classroom as a community of learners? What would that look like? What do strong communities look like? And my thought went straight to one thing. I don't know which group of people you would think of as a classic community, but for me, my thoughts went to sport, fans, football fans. So, yeah, it got me thinking, you know, I wonder if we could try and make, I mean, the togetherness of football fans on that terrace, all singing together. You could talk to anyone wearing the same colours, couldn't you? Have a joke with anyone, just completely bonded, all same sense of purpose, everyone included. Could we do that? Could a classroom be like that? Well, it got me thinking anyway, and I don't know. I found this line of inquiry quite rewarding, and I've thought of several ideas. I think what makes a football team, football fandom quite together is this idea of these memorable experience and also sharing those memories. Do you remember the time that we trounced this team 7-0 or whatever, or that so-and-so got sent off? It's that shared history, isn't it? And I want you to think of the walls in your classroom. Do you have a shared history visible? I was thinking back to my classroom at school. I've got all those pronunciation posters, map of Britain, you know, all the usual stuff we put on the walls. But where's the shared history? Is the shared history there? Where are the things that they did that they're particularly proud of? Those days we got them to do like a newspaper front page and we're sticking it there because it was such an amazing fun activity. Even a game board that they did that they enjoyed or something, you know. But yeah, do we signal that? I wonder. I don't think I do. I mean, do we have a name for them? My class are called 9G. That's not great, is it? Or one of my classes. Could we think of a nickname for the class? Could we get them to think of nicknames? What about a motto? Gosh, if anyone wants to post any mottos, that would be awesome. I can't think of any myself. Or even a logo. Get some of the artists to design some sort of logo for the class. And I think, you know, focusing on the positive characteristics. I must admit, I didn't do this before, but I've started doing this now, sort of saying, do you know what? You guys are so much better at this than that other group. They took ages to get this. You've got it in one. Or, you know, oh, my favourite students. And, you know, just sort of make these kind of references to them, their unique characteristics. Running jokes, I think, if a student ever makes a particular joke, picking up on it again and again is, you know, I think wonderful, creates that real bonding, a sense of togetherness. And identifying maybe common hardships and threats. So if you've got any test coming up, you know, oh guys, we've got this test coming up, what should we do? You know, oh, let's deal with it together, let's help each other. Can you help so and so? Have you got enough notes? Right, you need to share your, you know, doing this sort of sense that we're in this together. Not that next week the test is going to separate you from those who have done their work and not, but, you know, we're all going to work together to overcome this common threat. I don't know if you like it, the idea of building a community, but anyway, it's something I felt, yeah, that's something I'm going to try and do a little bit more. Let's move on to perhaps another thought here, and this time the amount of social interaction. And I thought I could just get you to post a few ideas here. So when you think about classroom planning, how can you increase the amount, so not so much the quality, but the volume of interaction that's happening between students in the classroom? If you could perhaps share just a few thoughts on that. Circle games, yeah. Yeah, circle time is so important, isn't it? It's sort of similar things posted to the things we posted at the start, isn't it? But yeah, really lovely ideas. drama, activities, yes, plays, even flashcards, yeah, absolutely, because they have to test each other, don't they? One person look at the front and the other test them. Yeah, great, good. So let's think about this. I mean, you've posted a better list of ideas, of course, than I came up with, but I just thought I'd add a few to myself, and most of them I think you've already mentioned. Just try to move on to the next slide. It's taking a little while. I'm going to try again. Oh no, there we go. Yeah, I think moving amongst students is really important. It's going and sitting next to them. So don't, I think what I'm saying is sort of don't forget that presence thing. It's a little bit like in a train carriage, if someone comes along and they sit next to you, after a while, you don't do anything, you don't talk necessarily to that person. But if they then got up at a station and got off, you'd say goodbye probably. It's that kind of just that quiet bond that tends to build. And if maybe I'm watching a video or something, rather than standing at the front, going and sitting with them, or while they're doing something, rather than planning the next task or whatever, sort of walking among them, sitting down and commenting on them and what they're doing and that sort of thing. So I think, the amount of social interaction that we're doing with them as well is pretty important. But of course, the student-to-student stuff, just like you all said, mingling, task-based learning is probably the most intensive sort of way we can get students to constantly collaborate with each other, isn't it? Make the whole lesson basically a collaborative enterprise for the students. All right, great. So I think, not just the quality, but the quantity. Every time there is a positive interaction, there is relatedness building, every time. So if we can just keep on adding these moments of positive interaction, we're going to keep on building that sense of relatedness. It's just going to grow and grow. Let's move on to the next idea, the fourth one, and this is healthy interaction. This is where I think, we have to really take the lead. So we've got, let's imagine a student coming in who's feeling a little bit sort of low or fed up. That can often spread to students. It's called negative contagion. If one student feels a little bit low, and I think what we can do perhaps is go up to that student and we can say to them, are you okay? I see you're not feeling great today. Do you want to sort of step outside for a bit, or do you want to, and just try to sort of lift them a little bit to prevent that contagion spreading around the class. So as they're walking in, really trying to spot anyone that's looking a bit low and sort of zooming in on them and seeing if they want to sort of step out. Obviously cliques, people that seem to be a bit pally, trying to separate them, trying to sort of mix up people so there isn't a sense of some people forming subgroups within the class, trying to stop people dominating. If there's any disputes, say, guys, I know you're having a dispute and I'm going to help you resolve that after the class, but for now I'm just going to ask you for 40 minutes or 50 minutes of calm, and then we'll sort it out. So all these things, healthy interaction. If the classroom interaction obviously becomes sort of unhealthy, we're going to destroy everything in terms of relatedness. And I think the most important job, perhaps, is just trying to make sure that the characters, the group sort of gel and sort of come together, coalesce for that particular small amount of time that we have them. So that's an approach, depending on the group, could be really, really important. And the next one I wanted to talk about really is going back to the idea that we touched on before about online communities and the value of social interaction, because I think a lot of the interaction that we do with our students in the class, especially social stuff, perhaps role plays, well, they can do online and practice online very easily. And if I just go on to the next slide, I'll show you perhaps what I mean. So these online communities that students take part in, they're often called naturalistic or communities of practice. And naturalistic because they are, I suppose, in the real world. And the classroom is not a natural social environment, if you like. It's sort of not one that exists apart from for learning, I suppose. So when students go online, they have obviously huge opportunities to talk, but the goals tend to be perhaps social goals. Exchanges could be a bit superficial. They're great for, I think, passive social interaction, like streaming, and also for discussing topics of interest, special topics, so gaming communities, for example. And therefore, I mean, if a student is in the class and you're talking about things which they can talk about online, such as gaming or a particular video, then they may think, well, I can just do this offline. Out of the classroom. Why are we doing it perhaps in class? I think there is value in preparing for what they do online, but let me just show you perhaps what I mean. So the classroom space, instead of being a place where we sort of try and do everything, we can try and think about how we can perhaps imagine the things that are going to be useful to them outside of the classroom space. These are often called communities then of imagination. So the classroom, instead of becoming perhaps a places of learning, is a place where students imagine using language outside of the classroom. So feedback, for example, could be connected to, perhaps the real world. Like, this is great, I can see you using that when you do this, when you travel or when you meet someone in a foreign country. Or I think the other thing is exploring difficult topics. When we're online, you can't really post anything that's controversial because you will get bullied, I think, or students would feel that, the online space is not the space where they can really have a safe, trusting sort of atmosphere and share things. Whereas I think classrooms really can be. And so there used to be, I don't know if you remember this book, Taboos and Issues, that used to be around ages ago, but it was brilliant. They always had really difficult topics, which I think students could enjoy talking about without feeling that they were going to get into an argument or fight with people. And I think now as well, I mean, there's all sorts of really controversial topics in the news. Of course, the Middle East, what's sort of happening, perhaps Eastern Europe, and that there are, I think, lots of things that students would probably value the chance to talk about, but feel they can't talk about it outside of the classroom. And so I think, trying to learn how to get students to talk about what's really on their mind in class is one way that we can make those interactions really valuable for them, so that they really appreciate coming into class. Also talking about family difficulties, things which, really hard to talk about, but, allowing students to broach those topics if they want to, not forcing them to, but permitting them to. But yeah, although I'm going to contradict myself slightly here and say, let's not duplicate what they're already doing online, I think preparing them, sort of saying, look, I know you're going to have loads of opportunity outside the class to post stuff, but we're going to just practice. Yes, see, what are you going to post today? Or what have you posted yesterday? Let's write it out, put it on the wall, make sure that, prepare, you've got the language you need to communicate. We used to do it in my class with post-it notes quite a lot, just get them putting post-it notes on the wall, pretending they were online posts. And I think that can be something which they really, they think, oh, that's valuable because I can then go and use that when I'm outside in the real world, or if you like, or the online world. So increasing, perhaps not so clear that topic, but the idea there of therefore thinking about the value of what we get them to do in the classroom in relation to their worlds, in particular their online worlds, which is where they use English the most. Okay, good. One more thing to look at, and that is, I mentioned real world scenarios like interviews as well. They don't get to practice that outside the classroom. So I think if we can do, whether it's presentations, interviews, that would be, I think, really valuable for them as well. Okay, last one. Yeah, so probably the most important one. There's no point, is there, in doing all of this stuff about relatedness and building communities and everything if we don't then turn it into striving behavior and learning. So let's just finish off by thinking then let's imagine we've got a class and they really love coming and they trust each other and they trust us and we have a great time together. How can we make sure that that is channeled into the direction we need it to be channeled in? Okay, so just a few ideas. I suppose it's about taking our related classroom and making the value of striving a group norm, striving behavior. So it's almost like condition. Be part of, if you want to be part of this group we strive, we work hard, we are purposeful, and making that a kind of defining characteristic of membership of the group. If you want to be affiliated to the classroom, this is the condition, this is what you have to do. So yeah, I think really that's in the language we use, isn't it? Although it could be put up on the walls, or we could use other signals to show these values. But as teachers, I think the best thing we can do is just sort of say things about the future. Oh, that's a really good phrase. Now, how are you going to use it? What are you going to do with it? Or we can say something like, I really enjoyed your homework this week. It was brilliant. I can't wait to see what you're going to do next time. Or perhaps, let's share some of our achievements this week. Has anyone managed to use that new word? Did you use that grammar structure at all? Let's try and get students to celebrate their achievements. And finally, yeah, if people make mistakes, they get embarrassed, that's absolutely fine. In this class, we just keep trying, right? That's what we do, and try and make that idea of perseverance a norm for the group. Okay, and that is all I wanted to share with you. So 6 strategies to try and build that all-important sense of relatedness, which I think perhaps more than anything else is the thing that is going to motivate our students to learn. Okay, thank you so much. Sean, have we got time for some questions?
Yeah, there are about 8 minutes for questions. If you click on the Q&A tab, Teresa has them all lined up there for you. So if you have a look there, obviously you can go in any order you like. The one at the top is the one that's been there the longest, so to speak.
Q&A tab, yep, got it.
If you need my help, just say.
That's all right. Is it the one by Jimmy?
Yeah, that'll be the first question you can see. Obviously, you need to scroll to see all the questions.
Yeah, okay. So, Jimmy asked, what if your class is online because of being in different cities and countries? How can we make it more socially active? That's a really good point, Jimmy. It is hard, isn't it? I think allowing the sort of channels and chat groups, breakout rooms, that sort of thing can really help. And microphones as well. If you think about, I think the big thing about online teaching is where there's confusion in meaning, and text is awful because you can't often understand what people mean by something they write. What did you mean by that text? What are you saying? It's that sort of trust in what people mean by things. And I think smaller groups where you can perhaps have their photo more clear on the screen, and in a breakout room, I think would help. You could even give that sense of belonging and identity, like call each breakout room a certain name, so that there's a sense of, right, I can't think of, if you animal names, like the eagles go together or something. Maybe that sense of belonging and identity to a particular group could be achieved. So it is really hard online, and I think a lot of people, they sort of love online learning initially, don't they? Because they think, I can hide away. It's safe. But I think they really don't make progress. And the important thing is encouraging those students to still interact. And it's that passivity where they can just hide that destroys learning and motivation, I think. But when you force them to engage by find a way to get them into groups, I think that is the imperative. That's what I think. But thanks so much, Jimmy. I hope that helps. Let's see if any more. Lorna, how do you motivate students who really wanted to communicate but refused to use English, instead use their L1 to express their own ideas? Yeah. I think what we were talking about, that safe space, the building the trust and willingness to communicate. Personally, I wouldn't actually jump on people using L1. I think a lot of the time when we criticize students for using L1, and there was a time where that was the norm. If anyone used L1, they're, you know, no, we don't do that. We're talking in English here. But in the real world, of course, I think L1 is a resource that they're going to use. They're going to be translating a lot. They're going to be using their first language. And I think having chance in the class to discuss maybe the differences between L1. How would we say that in our language? Now, how would we express that in English? Can anyone think? That's exactly the kind of thing they will be doing when they go outside of the classroom and, you know, have to code switch or use, speak in English. They're going to be translating. So I really do believe that we should use the first language as a resource. And I think if they start to do that and feel it's okay to use their first language, as long as they then try and translate or try, and I think that will hopefully scare them less. And in time, they'll be more willing to take risks and try and use the English as a second, language. Anyway, Lorna, yeah, always a challenge, isn't it? But I think, I don't know what you feel, if you think there should be a zero tolerance approach to first language. But I think, celebrating the fact that these are multilingual students that do speak a language really well, but also are learning another. Personally, I would see, that we should accept communication in L1. Anyway, thank you so much, Lorna, for that. I'm going to pronounce your name wrong, Hua. I do apologise, but anyway, Hua. Should a teacher be friendly or strict to students in the first class? Yeah, how many times do we hear, don't break a smile until Christmas in this country? Yes, the idea that do you know what? I don't know. I personally can't really be different from sort of who I am, I think. I find it very hard to sort of be fake, and I don't think we should either. I think we should understand, I suppose, the version of ourselves that gets results in the classroom, and personally sort of stick to it. I think, if we try and be something we're not, I think we run the risk of students losing motivation quite early on. I think we can perhaps shift the balance towards discipline, perhaps at the beginning, but personally, I don't really understand that idea that, don't be yourself for a bit, don't show your character. I think if you're going to build relationships, you've got to show who you are, haven't you? You've got to show personality. You've got to share. I was at a talk recently where they were talking about, understanding where you come from. The students have to know you before they can trust you enough to share something about themselves. If we're going to expect students to be related, they're going to have to know all sorts of things about us, aren't they? Obviously there's a limit to what we'd want to share, but I think our willingness to be open and reveal our true selves is a precondition really for them to do the same. And I don't quite think you'll be able to form any relationship without that having taken place. So my instinctive reaction would be to, just show them yourself and make sure that you've got those rules in place to defend you rather than relying on a sternness, I think. But anyway, thanks so much, Hua. That's a brilliant question. We're going to move down to Cressley's question now. Hi, Cressley. What strategies must be applied for a student who is really good in reading English but doesn't understand a thing about what he's reading? Yeah, we haven't talked about reading, have we? Because I think this is something which perhaps today we've been focusing more on the kind of social interaction sort of outside of reading. But I think it's actually really a great opportunity to do social interaction. I know at OUP, we used to have these reading circles. Look them up, they still exist. And you basically got students reading a short story in English, and then getting together in a group. And they all took different roles. I think one of them was had to summarize, be the summarizer. One of them was the word master. So that's a bit gendered, isn't it? Sorry about that, but it used to be. And they had to find keywords in the passage. What were the other roles? Discussion leader. You had to think of 3 questions to ask. They were brilliant. Used to really love doing those. But I think that's a great way of doing it. I would, I think if they're good at reading English but don't really sort of understand, and use that as an excuse to launch into real relatedness. I mean, you put reading circles as such a wonderful way of relating to other students, because you've got that shared experience. It's like when you come out of a movie with all the other people leaving the movie theatre and everyone's chatting about the movie and having a, you know, that's what we want to aim for, I think. I don't know if I've got time for any more. It looks like the time has run out, but
yeah, you probably have to rush the last one, so it's probably a good time to stop.
Yeah, okay. All right. But thank you so much for those questions. And obviously do feel free to send any questions you'd like answered to my email. Sean, I haven't actually put the email on the slide, but is it on the, will they be getting information about?
They'll get follow-up email and stuff like that. Yeah, that's fair enough. I don't know what was sent out, but there you go. So I've just put the reading circle thing that Nick's talked about. I've just put the link to the OUP website, part of it for the reading circles, into the chat box if people want it. Thank you so much, Nick. As always, enjoyable. As someone who specializes in online relatedness, I was interestingly listening to some of your points. But and I think that it's interesting that this chart, I think, actually applies to online learning as much as face-to-face learning. But we can pick that up another day. So thanks very much for doing that. And if you want to, Nick mentioned, or we mentioned at the beginning, that you've got that he was involved in a position paper. That position paper is coming out very shortly. Sorry, it is out now. It's download now. So you can click on that and go and get that position paper from it. We'll remind you of these links later on. So, but if you want to download it now, you can click on that link for it. Nick, thank you very much.